And Yasmin, if anyone comes into the waiting room, would you be able to admit them?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, so I called this project, or we decided rather, that watercolor snowflakes was a great idea. But then when we thought about it again, it's not just watercolor snowflakes. So it's just a generic snowflake experience. So this is our, this is our first image. If you've been to the museum in the last few years, you might have seen this on view in our children's illustration gallery. It's from the book by Harry Devlin called Nobby Boys to the Rescue. It's a very sweet story. And this particular scene just, I feel like, really evokes the feeling of wintertime and a cold, snowy day where, you know, you want to be inside curled up by the fire or under a blanket. You know, maybe mom or dad will make you some hot chocolate, put on a movie, and you just sort of watch the snow fall outside. And you can see that what Harry Devlin did here was use all these little white dots to make the snowflakes. So they don't look like the crystals that you might see, you know, on holiday cards or the snowflakes that you might have seen in Frozen, but you really get the sense that there's a lot of snow coming down, and the bear and her little cub and their little friends here are just staying nice and cozy inside. So that's one way to make snowflakes, which we'll talk about once we get started with the project. This next image, it's a hand-colored print, and it is from our Japanese collection. So you can see all of these people here, these three people, they're hard at work in a very snowy landscape. So you can see the trees here with their branches are really weighed down with snow. I know I have some trees that look kind of like this one here in my backyard, and when the snow comes down, all the branches sort of fall forward and everything hangs down and looks very, very heavy and very, very cold. So this is another interesting way of representing snow. Instead of getting actual snowflakes, you just sort of see the snow coating all of the branches, even coating, you know, the umbrellas and the hats that the people have. So you really get the feeling of heavy snow as opposed to, you know, little flakes and sprinkles coming down. And then our last image, this is one of my favorite artists in our collection, Martin Lewis. This is called Stoops in the Snow, and it's another print. So basically what this artist did, he drew on a piece of probably paper or metal and drew with like a very sharp needle. So not even a pen or anything like that. He made all of these lines like with something kind of like a sewing needle. So if you can imagine all the time and effort that it took to get all of these little details on the stairs here, and then just look at the way the snow is falling over the people and onto the sidewalk. So I feel like this is kind of like a cross between the snowflakes that were the dots and the heavy snow on the tree branches, because you can see all these like wisps of snow sort of blowing in the air. You can see even down here, the snow looks like it's blowing, and over here, like along this person's coat. So you get the real sense, almost like they're in a blizzard. So I don't know if you've ever been in the car and you're just driving and or mom and dad are driving. Most of you, I think, are too young to be driving, but you're driving and it kind of looks like you're in outer space or in what they call a whiteout, where all you can see is the snow coming at you. Or if you're walking somewhere and the snow is just blowing in every direction, that's kind of what this reminds me of. So you can't see, again, the individual flakes, but you really get an idea of how it's snowing and blowing and going absolutely everywhere, and it looks like it must be pretty cold. So I would say those are some things to keep in mind when we're making our projects today. And this is just a little sample of, what's possible with what the materials are that Yasmin and I have chosen for you. So for example, this piece up here, this was made just with water, crayon, and marker, and a little bit of salt. It's really cool when you sprinkle salt on wet paper with like marker or paint, it makes these really neat blooms, and it kind of looks like almost magical, which has been fun to see. This is again just watercolor with crayon. So you can get a lot of different cool effects by using watercolor. And over here as well, you can see we use some different colors of crayons. So while white might be the most traditional snowflake color, you can really use whatever color you want. This one up here was done with food coloring. So instead of using colored water from watercolors, we used some food coloring in water, and that's how we made those. But again, with some crayons and with some salt. And these snowflakes down here, these were made with glue, salt, and colored water. So either with food coloring or with watercolors. So Yasmin will tell you all about that. And this is just an example, like if you want to make a final project, which I think we might get into just a little bit, where you combine all the different skills that you learned today to make a really snowy scene with different kinds of snowflakes. So here's our list, and this probably came to your grown-up via email. So this is just showing you what you're going to need. And I believe that you are all already set up. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Yasmin.
Hi, everybody. My name is Yasmin, and I'm going to be doing this activity with you today. I know Claire showed a pretty big list of materials that we might need for this activity. If there's something that you see that you don't have, or that maybe you wanted to use an alternative, feel free to either talk to us or talk to Claire in the chat, whichever you're more comfortable with. And we can try to see if there's something else that you can use instead of it. But for now, I'm gonna switch over to the iPad. Hang on 1 second, please. Okay, can everyone hear me? Can everyone hear me? Hopefully.
You sound good. Yep.
Oh, better. Okay, cool. Awesome. So I have a tray. If you have a baking sheet, any sort of thing to just put underneath your paper would do good. It'll help you catch the salt when we eventually use that salt activity. And I actually have masking tape, and I'm going to tape down my watercolor paper so that it doesn't move around on my table. So if you wanted to do that, that might be the best way to make sure your paper doesn't go for a walk while you're trying to paint it. Give me 1 second. I'm almost done taping.
Yeah, it is a little bit helpful, even just the corners, because I know mine started to curl up, and I would get these little puddles of water. So even if you have like some Scotch tape, I found that really helpful.
Yes.
But again, as long as you have a tray, your material will be contained, so you should be all right.
Okay, let me just make sure you can see. Okay, so my hope was to start our first project with crayons, which we will then paint over with either whatever you have at home. I have watercolors. It could be markers, or even food dye that you added to water, or watercolors that you diluted in water. I was hoping to make a snowflake scene. and I was going to start using my white crayon. The tricky part that I found about using a white crayon on this white piece of watercolor paper is it's really hard to see what you've drawn so far. So I have to be kind of careful, and sometimes I'll stop and try to catch myself. See, I've been drawing and you can't see what I've been drawing. So it's a little tricky. I would just say go for it. And when we paint over it, we will find out what it looks like. But don't stress if it doesn't come out exactly how you wanted it to. That's part of the mystery of using white crayon on a white piece of paper. I'm going to do another snowflake here, and then I'm actually going to switch to a different color crayon just so we can see what that's going to look like as well.
And sometimes if you are really concerned about where your snowflakes are, if you sort of tilt the paper a little bit under to catch the reflection of the light in a window or in your in whatever room you're working in, you might be able to see a little bit of shine from where the crayon was. So just a helpful tip in case you're searching for your missing snowflakes.
How do you draw snowflakes?
That's a good question, actually. I'm gonna actually demonstrate on the back of a different paper with a colored crayon. And this is just one example of how I do it. And I usually start by making a plus sign. So I usually start by making a plus sign like this. And then I'll usually make an X on top of that. So an X is like this. And then I usually add what can be only described as tiny little feet that you add to the little pieces that you've drawn so far. That's how I usually draw my snowflakes. And then I'll show you what I add to it at the end. I hope this helps. And that's what I've been drawing with my white crayon. I know it's super hard to see, and I'm so sorry. Hopefully you'll get to see it once I add color to it.
Yeah, and if you, I have Yasmin spotlighted, so you should be able to see this no matter who is talking. However, if you go into view, you can switch to speaker view, and then Yasmin's screen will be the biggest one you'll see, and we should all be in little squares at the top. So that might help you get a better like zoomed in view if you're having trouble.
And just to finalize on this little snowflake, you can add little itty bits in the middle. You can draw some sort of circle to sort of add to it. Once you get the basic shape down, you can add to it as much or as little as you want. Another simplified version, and I did this in mine with the white crayon, is just something like this. This is still a snowflake, very, very simple. And then as you go through, if you wanted to add more detail, that's definitely an option. You can add little circles to the end, and then maybe just a couple little, I call them feet. You can, I'm sure there's a technical term, I just don't know it off the top of my head. But yeah, that's the thing about snowflakes is it's very open-ended. You can take it to a million different ways. You can make it very unique to you as you're drawing. So I'm gonna go back to my drawing, but let me know if anyone wants me to walk through perhaps another different type of snowflake. I am more than willing to come back to that.
Yeah, feel free to unmute yourself if you have any questions, just like when you asked about how to draw snowflakes. We're more than happy to answer any questions.
So I was gonna add, I've been decorating. So one of the things that I've been decorating in my house is a wreath. And I've never drawn a wreath before. This will be my first attempt. And I was gonna add it to this drawing. So bear with me. I'm gonna start out with, I always used to start out with basic shapes. They usually try to help me. That's why I started off with the plus sign or the X for the snowflake. For a wreath, I'm going to start out with 2 circles, a bigger one and a smaller one. And then I have a couple different shades of green, and I'm going to add in a couple different types of leaves and branches. So it's going to be my wreath. I might add a bow to it as well. I think that would be very festive. Let's see if I can add my bow in now. Okay. Usually I try to draw almost very lightly with my crayon until I'm sure that it came out looking how I wanted it to look. And then I'll go over it again a little bit thicker, because the wax substance that's in our crayons, the thicker it is, the better it'll be in the long run for this project. Once we go over it with watercolor or food coloring, you're going to want that water to just almost bypass the wax that's in our crayons. So if you feel like you're drawing very lightly with your crayon, that's 100% fine. But once you feel like you've gotten a good idea or a good sense of what you're drawing, I would go back over it with a slightly thicker application. That way the watercolor will really not stick to whatever it is that you're drawing. So see, I'm going over my green to make sure it's a little bit thicker.
Yeah, and once you put the watercolor or colored water over your thick crayon lines, it'll make a really cool effect, because it resists, as Yasmin was saying, the water resists the wax from the crayon. So it'll be really neat to be able to see sort of how your snowflakes come to life from not being able to see them to then being able to see them once you put the watercolor or food coloring water over it.
Hope everyone can see so far. Feel free to stop me or ask me any questions along the way if you have them. I know up here, don't forget, I mean, I've almost forgotten, I have 3 snowflakes up here, but because I did them in white crayon, I can't see them right now. So it's easy for me to forget that they're not there, but they are, I promise. And we will be able to see them once I start the watercolor. Okay, I'm just going to color in my wreath, and then I'm going to start my watercolor. I think I'm going to start with a blue background just to keep in theme with the winteriness. So I have water and I have my watercolors. They're over here. I have a watercolor set. Might be a little bit off to the side, but I wanted you to at least see what they look like. So I'm going to dip my paintbrush in the water first and then go to my watercolors. Let me pull this down a little bit. There we go. Oh, can everyone see that? I'm going over that first snowflake I did earlier, and see how the watercolor just pretends that where I did the crayon, it just pretends it can't stay there. So it just keeps going and leaves that part alone. I don't know if everyone can see my snowflake right there.
That came out really great.
Thank you. I feel like it's almost a game of hide and seek when I do this. And there's the second snowflake. And
Watercolor brush markers.
I'm sorry, what was that question?
Can we use watercolor brush markers?
Claire, did we try that, or?
I don't even know what watercolor brush markers are, but I would say absolutely. I know
I would definitely try it.
Yeah, one of the pictures that I made, I drew my snowflakes and then I colored over it with marker and then put water over the marker. So I'm assuming watercolor brush markers are kind of sort of in the middle with that kind of technique. So yeah, go for it.
If it doesn't work out, we can always try again with something different, but I would definitely try it. Here is my third snowflake being revealed.
And I just want to say to all of the grown-ups that are helping out today, if you want to email me any of your artists' finished work after our program today, you're welcome to. I'll leave my email in the chat. We would love to see what you guys come up with.
The advantage of this project too is there's so many different materials and ways that you can interpret it. So I'm excited to see how it turns out for everybody. So it's a little gloomy by where I live. It's a little overcast. So I'm going to add a little gray to my blue. Not a lot though, just a little bit. And let's see. And that'll be my background for my wreath. So see, my wreath still stays pretty much the same. All the areas that I didn't color in get colored in by the watercolor. I don't know if everyone can, hope everyone can see that. So there's a few spots in on the ribbon of my wreath that I hadn't colored in with crayon. And they're the ones that the watercolor really like took to the watercolor paper. And then I'm gonna let this dry. It's still very wet from the watercolor. And I'm going to start our glue project on another piece of paper so that you can see what that looks like. And then maybe at the end, if you wanted, we could add that glue project to this watercolor in our crayon project. So I'm gonna just very gently take the tape off of my tray and get another piece of paper. If you want to use the same piece of paper and you want to wait a little bit for it to dry, that's more totally okay. I put a lot of water on this one, so I'm gonna have to wait for it to dry for quite a few minutes before I can start the next one. There we go. I'll put that to the side. And I'm gonna tape down my next piece of paper. What I found to work really well for the salt activity is not only having the tray underneath, but also having a second paintbrush that's dry to help brush off any excess salt that you may have. If you don't have an extra paintbrush, that's totally okay. I would just stand near a trash can that you maybe have at home, just to brush off all that extra salt so it doesn't make as much of a mess. I made a mess at home, so I learned this the hard way. but the tray should definitely help. Okay, so I have two types of glue. I have regular glue, and I also have glitter glue that I had at my house. So I'm gonna try starting this project with regular glue first, and then I'm gonna show you guys what it looks like with glitter glue. But whatever you have at home will work great. Now, it's very tricky to draw. You're essentially drawing with your glue. It's very tricky because it can run a little bit easier. It'll be easier to sort of make it messy, but just don't panic, and try to keep your designs as simple as possible with the glue so that it'll contain any sort of mess. My snowflake for right now is going to be the simplest snowflake I can make for that exact reason, so that I know that this glue will not get everywhere. Okay, that's my simple design. If it were any other material, I would probably want to make it more complicated, but because we're doing this with glue and salt, I do not want to complicate it. And I have just a large 1 pound, 10 ounce container of salt, and it has this little spigot. And I'm just going to very, very gently shake it on there.
Can you use purple glue?
Can you use what? I'm sorry?
Can you use purple glue?
Of course you can use purple glue. You can use any glue that you like, as long as it's wet enough to let the salt dry onto it. So I normally put a little bit more salt than I needed to, just to make sure everything is adhering. And I'm just going to give it a minute to solidify. And then, so if you have a tray at home, or maybe a baking sheet or anything that you've put underneath your artwork, you can sort of tilt it very, very slightly so that the excess salt gathers. So I don't know if you could see that, but my excess salt is gathering right here at the bottom, and I tap it to let it do that. Still have some. And then one trick that I found as well is, if you look really closely at your snowflake, and if you see any areas that are still really shiny, those are the spots that don't have enough salt. So I'm just going to go back in just for a couple spots and add a little bit more salt, just so I know that my salt got to every part of my snowflake. And then normally what I do is I let my salt gather in the corner. And then when I'm all done, I'll go to the trash can and I'll just get rid of all that salt. But you're more than welcome to, if you have more than one snowflake that you make, you can try to neatly pick up some of the salt and sprinkle it over your next snowflake. I'm just not very coordinated that way, so I will be using the little spigot on my salt container. This is where the dry brush comes in. So in between these two little areas of snowflake is a lot of salt that gathered. So I'm going to use my dry brush and just brush it away from my paper and to that area where I'm collecting the salt. There we go. And this just helps sort of get rid of those big clumps of salt. All right, so I think this part is good. And now I'm going to demonstrate the fun part of this snowflake because, well, the glue is fun, but this part is the really cool part where we get to add color to our snowflake. So I'm going to get my brush back, not the dry salt brush, but my watercolor brush from earlier. And I'm going to pick a color. I think I'm going to pick pink for today. And I'm going to get my brush wet and saturated with the color. And then, let's see, I'm going to come in and see how I dripped a little bit and then it spread. So you can do that with where your glue is. Let me get a little bit more paint. All right, so let's try that again. So see how it spreads on the parts of your snowflake. And then I'm just going to get that last little bit. And ta-da! I think it looks lovely.
It looks great. This is the part where you definitely want to take your time. That way your glue doesn't move around too much because it'll still be pretty wet.
Yes. I put a lot of salt on mine. So I was very liberal with my use of salt, which kind of helped me in that way. But if you used very little salt, I would definitely give it a minute or two before you start painting your snowflake, just so it gives it at least a couple minutes to dry. My next thing I'm going to show you is going to be the same type of snowflake, but with glitter glue. I picked red so that when I put the salt over it, you can still see that color. And it looks really cool. So I'm going to show you what that looks like just so you have a comparison. But if you don't have glitter glue at home, that's totally okay. This is just so you can see what it would look like. So maybe in the future, if you wanted to recreate this project. And I'm going to do the same type of snowflake. Is my glue not working? Let's see. No. Okay, let's try that again. It was working a couple days ago. There we go. So here I'm starting with my plus sign. That's usually my go-to in terms of snowflakes. A little bit more to the top part. And then I'm going to add a small X on the inside. Okay. And I'm just going to try to add a couple small details just to see if they'll come out okay. Because this glue is a little bit, it's almost semi-dry. I think it's because it's an old glue versus my white glue, which is brand new. So it gets everywhere. So let's see if we can get a little bit of detail with this one, hopefully. Oh, and when you're doing these, it helps to make them very big on your paper because the smaller you make it, the more of a chance you have of all that glue sort of just jumbling together, sort of how in the middle I did the plus sign and then the X symbol. That middle section is just one sort of glob of glue in the middle. So the smaller I try to make it, the more there's that overlap of glue and then you can't really see what you're trying to draw. So definitely draw big when you draw with glue. And then I'm going to add salt to this. Again, I'm usually very generous with my salt, so I'll have a lot to clean up afterwards, but it's okay. And I'm going to give it just a second to rest. Got some salt on me already. Now, when I did the glitter glue, when I did it the first time, I did not paint over it because it already had a color, and I really kind of liked the effect of the red of the glitter glue and the white of the salt. It almost looked like a snow effect to me, a snow on snow effect, actually. But this time I'm going to try to use watercolor on it just to see what it's going to look like. It'll be an experiment for all of us. But first, I'm just going to let that salt dry a little bit. This is my dry brush. I'm just trying to move some of the salt out of the way. Some of that excess salt that I definitely put there. And again, this brush needs to be dry to do this. If it's wet, it will all just clump onto the brush.
Could you also just hit the paper like over the garbage or something?
I could, yes, but it's really far away.
Oh, no, I totally get that.
If next time I would have a garbage next to me, that would be a great idea, actually. But I did not think that far ahead.
Okay, yeah, I guess I just figured in case people didn't have a second brush, that could be another option for you.
Yes, and also what I'm doing here is I'm lifting up my tray and I'm tapping the back of it, and all that salt is collecting here at the bottom. So that's an alternative too. If you don't have a brush, just tap the back of the tray that you have. And then I'll get rid of all the salt at the end. So now we're going to try painting the glitter glue snowflake. And because I already have a red on there, I'm going to try to do a different color that will stand out a little bit more. I'm going to try a blue. So I'm getting my blue color. And let's see how this is going to work. Okay, everybody. Huh. It covers the red if you go over it, obviously, but if you just do it for some of the snowflake and not all of it, you could almost have a two-toned snowflake, which is kind of neat.
That's a really cool idea.
Thank you. So I'm going to do just this part. Let's see if I can get a little bit more. Let's see. Just going to do this little section. And then I'm going to leave these two wings red just to give it a little different color. We could also do this with our regular white glue snowflake. We would use red watercolor for these ends and use blue for anything else that we wanted to use blue on. So that went really well. Is everyone following so far? Does anyone have any questions? Is it working for you in terms of the glue and salt project?
Yeah, and if you want, because you can choose one of the reactions. I think there's a thumbs up icon if you want to just hit that if it's working. I have someone in the chat saying, yep, it's working. So
Awesome.
I think we're
Awesome.
good.
Good. So now that I've done these and that these are drying, I'm actually going to return to my crayon and watercolor art, and I'm going to add in what we've learned here with the glue and salt. So I'm going to basically combine those projects. You don't have to. You can do a different project. You can continue on this paper and do more of the glue and salt project. I just wanted to put it all together now that that paper has dried. So let me grab it. And anytime you move the paper that is the glue and salt project, just be very aware that there may still be little pieces of salt on it, and you don't, just to be careful so you don't spread it throughout the house. So there's still a little bit of salt on this, and I'm just gonna turn it over on my tray to make sure that I don't spread it. So I'm just gonna do this, and then I can move it aside. Cool. So I'm gonna come back to this one, and I want to put some of that glue and salt snowflakes on this piece because I really liked it. I thought it was coming out really well. And I just want to add to it. If you wanted to add to something that had watercolor on the background, you would have to wait because the glue on an already wet surface is only going to take longer to dry. So that's why I waited at least for this. And now I'm going to use the regular white glue. And I'm going to make a couple snowflakes. And I'm going to try a couple different colors, a couple different designs. So maybe you can get some ideas for your own artwork.
And we have Jack who wants to share his work.
Absolutely. I would love to see Jack's work.
All right, Jack, I will spotlight you. Oh, wow. Those look awesome.
That looks really good.
Great job.
I love that you picked blue. Blue is one of my favorite colors, so I think it looks awesome.
I feel like blue just works really well for snowflakes too.
Yeah, I agree.
Great job.
Can we see your crayon and watercolor artwork as well?
I'll tell them about this one.
Ooh.
That looks awesome.
I like the mixture of the different blues. That looks really cool.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice? Our snowflakes were like very faint in there. Do we just need to go heavier with the white crayon or?
Yes. So that's the same thing that happened with my three. So this one is, I went very heavy with my white crayon and it's a lot more visible. Whereas these, I was starting out and I wasn't being too liberal with it. The more you press down on it, the more it's gonna, like the thicker almost that line's gonna be. And then the watercolor will avoid it better. You can also go over it. I know it's hard to see on a white paper, but if you can go over it once and then come back and almost go over it for a second time, that will really make those lines very thick and that'll make them more visible.
And it will completely destroy the point of your crayon. So
yes,
you'll be using a lot more crayon than you would anticipate.
I would even argue though that it's better to use a flat tip of the crayon because then it comes out thicker to begin with.
Yeah.
So
you could even use the back. Yeah.
that might be something to consider. Okay. So my paper's a little warped because of the watercolor. So my glue is almost pooling in certain areas. So I've gone back and I've added a little bit more glue and I have these little splatters of snowflake, if you will, perhaps. And I'm gonna try now with adding some salt to it.
And just a fun tip for everyone, if your paper still has some wet spots on it from water, you can sprinkle a little bit of salt into those watery spots and it'll sort of cause the color to bloom out a little bit and create a really neat effect if you want to add that.
I'm going to demonstrate that for everyone just so that they can visualize what Claire is talking about. So there is my spot of watercolor and I just sprinkled a little salt on it. Let me see if I can sprinkle a little bit more. And it's gathering almost a darker pigment where the salt is. Can everyone see that? Is that visible?
Yeah, that looks great. And then like once it starts to dry, you'll be able to really see the changing colors.
Yes. Cool.
And just so everyone knows, we've got about 10 minutes left. If you want to stay and hang out with us, we'll be here until 11. If you're finished and have some other plans for your day, you're welcome to head out, but we will be here for about 10 more minutes.
Okay, let's see. Trying to get rid of some of my excess salt. This was definitely one of our messier activities, I would say.
Yeah, I definitely think so. But I mean, it's rainy and sad outside, so
Yeah. But it was so fun with Snowflake, so I felt like it was worth the mess.
Yeah, it was really fun. I definitely had to vacuum after all of the practicing I did yesterday.
Yes.
But
I
it was
guess.
fun.
Right, so I'm gonna try to paint my snowflake. I'm gonna try to do a couple different colors just to make it a little more fun.
Well, that sounds good.
Thank you. When you are done with your salt snowflake activity, make sure you clean the brush really well. Mine always has some salt on it. Oh, wow. That's so nice.
Where are we putting it, Shan?
Wow, that's a new world record.
That looks awesome, you guys.
I love how all the colors you used on your snowflakes.
Let it dry. Let it dry.
Even if the world record is broken,
Right, the salt
even
is gonna
though
go away.
it's a record. That's why I'm still proud of myself.
Okay,
Just
guys,
an
we're done.
ordinary record. Yay!
I'm glad you guys had fun.
We are done. We are done. Yeah, I'm going to help Jen make more paintings. We are done.
Oh, wow.
That looks awesome.
I love
I
that.
like the variety of colors.
Looks
Very
really
cool.
great. Oh, and is that a wreath at the top as well? Okay, so I'm trying to do a bit of a multicolor snowflake over here. Don't know how effective it is yet, but I was thinking almost like a tie-dye effect. A friend of mine was wearing tie-dye the other day, so I was inspired. This one came out a little bit messier than I would have liked, but I still think it looks awesome because I love the multicolor. And let's see. I think I'm going to work on the background a little bit as well. And add a little bit more salt to it because I really love the effect that this had with the salt. So I'm going to try to add a little bit more to it. Let's see if I can do that. Okay. Let's see. What color? I really like how the colored crayons look in contrast with the watercolor as well.
Yeah, it really opens you up to a lot more possibilities. I mean, I'm just thinking like using even maybe like a metallic crayon or something would be really
Yes.
like
I
there's
would love to do
so
that.
many possibilities.
Absolutely.
All kinds of holiday or non-holiday imagery.
Yes. Every time I put a different watercolor color over those crayons, I don't know, I love it even more. It has like the texture of it. I know it's hard to see on the camera, but the watercolor stays kind of shiny, and then the crayon is actually almost a matte color.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Yeah, no, I think like especially like with some of the leaves on your wreath, like the shading just looks really neat.
Thank you. Okay. It's a little messy, but I kind of love it. So it's an abstracted snowflake landscape.
Yes, the essence of winter.
Yes.
That's what you can call it.
I love it. I want to see if we can go over with white crayon later, but it doesn't seem to pick up after you've already done the watercolor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you can't retroactively add more crayon.
All right, everyone. Well, it looks like we're just about out of time. So thank you so much for joining us. We had a great time hanging out, making some art this morning.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So, oh, Hunter, do you have something you want to show?
So this is mine.
Oh, there.
That looks so cool.
That's so fun. It's very wintry. I like it.
Yes, were those
Thank you.
snowmen?
Yeah, that's a snowman, and that's a person throwing snowballs.
Nice.
Great job.
Thank you.
Of course. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us on your Saturday morning.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, if anyone else wants to share, go ahead. Just keep in mind we are recording. But if not, thanks so much for hanging out with us, and we will hopefully see you again on January 2nd. We'll be sending out an email to everyone who is registered. We're hoping to have registration through Zoom instead of from the Google form, so it should be a little more streamlined. But we will we'll be in touch about that. Oh, and Eva wants to share. Let's see. Ooh, that is a lot of snowflakes. Very nice. Wonderful.
I love the colors you used.
Yeah, it looks very fun. Well, thanks so much. Oh, you have another one. Wonderful.
That looks awesome.
Oh, cool. I think that might be my favorite of all of your works. Great
Thank you
job.
for
Thanks for
showing us.
sharing. Hopefully we'll see you next time.
Thank you for coming.